Andrea from Lemoore, California, and you're watching Gospel Tangents, your best source for Mormon history, science, and theology.
And we're a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network. Beyond the Block is also a member of the network, and their podcast seeks to center the narratives of the marginalized in conversations on Mormonism. A Black lifelong member and a queer theologian, Brother Jones and Brother Knox seeks to fill the gaps between Mormon theology and Mormon culture, that people of all kinds of identities may claim a seat at the table of Christ. So, you want to check that out. In our next conversation, we're going to be talking about the lost pages in the Book of Mormon. Historian Don Bradley has been wondering about this ever since he was in primary. Don has found clues not only in the Book of Mormon, but in various accounts of Joseph's friends and relatives. So this is a fantastic book. You should get it. And we're going to talk more about this book in our next conversation. So check out our conversation. Lost 116 pages. Now, I heard another interview that you did, and it said that you have been wondering about this since primary.
Since primary. I think I was 10.
Wow.
I was in the South Bend, Indiana ward where Notre Dame is, and Mike Standiford was my primary teacher, Blazer A, and we did a unit on church history, on the presidents of the church, and somewhere I even got like a little, like coloring sheets that were like stapled together into a little book. I need to find this. Where that's at, but it shows like Joseph Smith and Martin Harris, and it tells the story of the lost pages. I remember being there in that primary class and thinking, we're missing part of the Book of Mormon? What was in it? You know, because like if you grow up a Latter-day Saint, how foundational is the Book of Mormon? Like, only absolutely foundational, right? As a child, like you're gonna hear more about the Book of Mormon, right, than anything, and how foundational it is. And so the idea that there was a big part of it that we didn't have, and nobody even talked about what was in it, you know, was just wild to me. And I think that when we encounter a funny idea, and then we encounter over and over and over again, it ceases to become funny to us. We just get sort of inured to it, right? We get used to it. And that's, I think, what has mostly happened, or to a good extent happened to us as a Latter-day Saint culture, is we're so used to the idea that part of our foundational scripture is missing that we didn't even give it much thought, you know? Isn't that kind of weird that we're missing? And in fact, you know what part we're missing? We're missing the first part. We're missing the original first part of the Book of Mormon. So Joseph Smith says in the 1830 preface to the Book of Mormon, he's explaining the book. Nobody's ever read this before. It's all new. And he has to explain, well, here's why there was something missing, and here's what had to be put in its place, you know. And so if you look at the Book of Mormon, 1830 Book of Mormon title page, right? It says these familiar words, the Book of Mormon, written by the hand of Mormon upon plates, and so on. If Joseph hadn't put a preface in there, readers would turn the page and be confronted with, I, Nephi. Now, why is it the Book of Mormon written by the hand of Mormon, written by Nephi? Who is Nephi, and what does he have to do with Mormon? Why am I not reading Mormon's book? It was talked about on the title page. So Joseph Smith explains this in the preface. He says that the first part of the book was actually originally Mormon's abridgment from the large plates. He doesn't use the term at the time large plates. That term hadn't evolved, but just from the plates of Nephi. And says that they were stolen and had not been able to recover them, and that in their place, God had commanded him to take these other plates and put them into the book. And so now readers turn the page again, and they're like, oh, I, Nephi, this is that record of Nephi that he was talking about, that's substituting for Mormon, the lost part of Mormon's abridgment. So people think, because Joseph Smith uses this term, Book of Lehi there. And there's a whole complicated discussion on this in my book in chapter 5. But Joseph Smith uses the term Book of Lehi to refer to this lost manuscript. And so people tend to think, because of that term, oh, it's just a missing account of Lehi. Actually, what Joseph says in his fuller explanation there is that, and what the revelation about telling him what to do about this lost manuscript, section 10 of the Doctrine and Covenants says, is that what's missing covered from Lehi, yes, Lehi, down to King Benjamin, early reign of King Benjamin. And so the small plates, which cover that exact same time period, need to be substituted in, and that fills the gap. Now, it fills it in a rather thin way because the small plates are such a tiny abridgment, the thumbnail sketch version of the same history that Mormon had given at length. Two things. So first, how big a chronological gap is that? Well, if you actually look at the Book of Mormon's chronology, from Lehi down to early to mid reign of King Benjamin is some 4.5 centuries. Based on the chronologies people have created, it would be, like in the Encyclopedia of Mormonism, it would be about 450 to 460 years. Now think of what's the total length of Mormon's abridgment. So Mormon's abridgment would have started originally with Lehi, so that's 600 BC, so that's one anchor point. Mormon himself picks up his narrative in 320 AD. So between 600 BC and 320 AD is 920 years. So what's half of 920? 460. How long is the missing part of Mormon's abridgment? It's 450 to 460 years. In other words, basically, and maybe even exactly half of Mormon's abridgment is gone. So we've been thinking, we're just missing another fuller account of Lehi. This is Mormon's book, right, which is mostly an abridgment, and then he picks up his own life. The first half of Mormon's abridgment is gone. How do you, take any book, take any lengthy narrative, rip out the first half, and then do just like a little Spark Notes version of the first half, or less than that even, thumbnail sketch, and then try to really understand the second half very well, and see how that goes. We got to understand more about those lost pages to understand the part that we need to understand more about the missing part of Mormon's abridgment to understand the part we still have. And that's actually what started me on this project 15 years ago.
So let me make sure I understand that, because what you're saying is, well, from what I understand, from what I've heard in the past, is our Mosiah chapter 1 is really Mosiah chapter 4. Is that correct?
3.
Okay. So 3. So I was under the impression, I guess I've always been under or for several years at least, since I've heard you talk about this, that the Book of Lehi covered 1st and 2nd Nephi, I guess the Words of Mormon, and then those little small books that, Jacob, Jeremiah, and all that stuff, which are just like...
And then the start of the missing part of...
So is that 400 years from Nephi to Mosiah? That's 400 years. And so we're missing you're saying half of the Book of Mormon.
Half of Mormon's abridgment. Now, Mormon picks up the narrative from his own experience later. So we're not fully missing half of the Book of Mormon, but we're missing half of Mormon's abridgment. So, there's Mormon's abridgment, and then there's when Mormon tells what's going on in his own lifetime, and then, Moroni adds a little bit afterward, right? So, Mormon's abridgment, we're missing almost exactly half of it.
Okay, so would the Book of Mormon be twice as big if we had that? Is that what you're saying?
I've tried to estimate. In fact, there's close to 20 pages of evidence laid out in my chapter 5 about just how much material we're missing. And here we get to actually one of the more startling things about the lost manuscript, in addition to realizing just how much we're missing of the chronology of the Book of Mormon, right? That we're missing half of Mormon's Abridgement, and we're missing the crucial first half, right? Well, I make just a quick aside there because it's been on my mind. So you realize this means we're actually missing the earliest Mormon scripture. We're missing the earliest scripture of the Restoration. So think of the Doctrine and Covenants revelations. The earliest one is by far is section 3. That's July 1828. What is it about? It's about the manuscript loss. It's a response to the manuscript loss. So the first recorded words of Revelation, the first words of Revelation Joseph is dictating and somebody's writing down, is that first half of Mormon's Abridgement, those lost pages. Then section 3, then section 4, then starting into the remaining part of the Book of Mormon that we do have, the extant text, scholars call it, and then Joseph's other revelations and so on. So the very earliest scripture, original scripture of the Restoration, gone. That's huge, right? So in this chapter, I also talk about the length of the manuscript. And my book is titled The Lost 116 Pages. Can you grab a copy?
Sure. Go ahead. We're all for selling.
Here's my book, The Lost 116 Pages, Reconstructing the Book of Mormon's Missing Stories. Mm-hmm. So notice I titled it The Lost 116 Pages. I spend much of my chapter 5 arguing that it probably was not 116 pages. Why would I have called it Lost 116 Pages? I'll tell you why. This is what we all know it as. This is what, it's in my head as is the Lost 116 pages. That's the term for it, right? Clear back from primary. That term was anchored very soon, very early in Mormon consciousness, because Joseph put the number 116 in the preface to the Book of Mormon, okay? So how can it be in the preface and it's not necessarily right? Well, I'll get to that. So,
the most correct book on earth?
my book is not the most correct book on earth, but it's got to be somewhere up there, right? I have heard people say it's the best book they've read on the Book of Mormon. Mm-hmm. I mean, people read a lot about the Book of Mormon, so I've been really happy to hear that. Because a good part of the point of the book really is to just illuminate the Book of Mormon text that we have. We delve into the mystery of what we don't have, and that illuminates what we do.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with historian Don Bradley. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about who were the scribes that wrote the lost pages of the Book of Mormon.
A lot of people may not know this, but Martin is not Joseph's only or first scribe on the lost pages. According to the sources, there were 4 scribes on the lost pages before Martin.
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please support Gospel Tangents and become a subscriber. For just $5 a month, go to patreon.com/gospeltangents and you can hear the entire interview. And you can also get transcripts available at either our Amazon website, or if you want to give the money to me and not Amazon, please subscribe on my website at gospeltangents.com, and you can click the yellow subscribe button. Of course, we're also on Facebook, Twitter, and all the other places. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes at tinyurl.com/gospeltangents. And don't forget to click here to subscribe on YouTube, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some more of our great videos. Thanks again for listening.